Welcome to Tentative Title with Tim. This is a podcast about creativity, about process, about filmmaking, and about screenwriting. Welcome everybody back to the podcast. So this past week, I've been thinking a lot about the way in which I write and the way in which I edit and the way in which I just perceive works of art, especially like like movies, and how a lot of it comes down to a rhythm, to a pacing of how the film is cut together, or how characters talk within a scene, or how just the rhythm. There's something very internal that happens with me, and I think with a lot of us when we watch a film, that kind of like it informs how we like a film or not like a film, if that makes any sense. So anyway, today I'm talking about pacing, and I think it's very important because I know that sometimes I will watch a film and it's not that the film was bad. It's not that the characters weren't interesting. It wasn't that, like, it wasn't a good film, but there's just something about it that just didn't click with me, and it just didn't hook me in, or there was just something about it that maybe a lot of people saw. They were really excited about it, and then I finally sat down to watch it, and I'm like, well, I don't get it, and maybe it's something that I don't necessarily have to point to every single time a film doesn't work, but I've noticed more often than not that the pace of a film actually is very, very important. And let me kind of piece this apart a bit. So there's the pacing of writing a script, and sometimes when I'm writing, I get in this zone, which I guess you could say is just like you're just in the story. You feel the characters, you feel what's happening, and you kind of know at what point to come in on a scene and when to end the scene, to move on to the next plot point, or to whatever. There's this momentum, there's this pacing that the characters are in when you're writing it. And that's why when I try to explain the mechanics of how to write something, it's like sometimes I don't actually know how to do it, because there is this rhythm that is established from page one, that when I'm writing it, I'm like, okay, well, this is happening, this character says this character says that leads to this, that leads to this. And it's like, it's not something that I think about, but it's something I feel. It's something that I know is right for the story, that I can imagine watching this story unfold, and those are the beats that feel natural as I'm writing it and as I'm reading it. And though those beats change, sometimes I reread something that felt really great, maybe I wrote it the day before, and then I come back to it and I'm like, yeah, my pacing, my rhythm about this scene felt right at the time that I was there creating it. But now, rereading it and having a fresh look at it, and being able to see the entire extent of what happens in the scene, what happens throughout the entire script, it actually doesn't work. And so, I try to keep that in mind, in terms of the different phases of creating the story. But it doesn't stop there. So there's the script part of it, where it's you're creating it, it feels good, but you go back into it and you kind of start to analyze it. You start to analyze the beats. You start to analyze what things feel natural and what don't feel natural, and you start to kind of put more context into it. So sometimes it's not the dialogue. Sometimes you just have to add a moment where a character just stops and does something. and then that moment feels real because the character is doing something real before they say a particular line. It gets very in the weeds, very much specific moments that actually give a better rhythm, give a better pacing to the script itself. But then when you get into production and you're on set and there's so many different pressures happening, and the actors are there and they're ready to go, and hopefully they're prepared, and you're there, you're there to shoot the scene, and sometimes the rhythm on the day feels off, and which it can be kind of like nerve-wracking because you're like, it worked on the page, like the pacing works on the page, why doesn't it work in reality? Why is it not coming through in the performance? And sometimes it can be because the actor is performing it in a certain way, and sometimes, like, I want to say, like, more often than not, even if I've written something a certain way, when it gets into the actor's hands, they always bring something new to it that I never thought. That, like, a certain line that I wrote that I was like, I want it to sound like this, but then the actor gets a hold of it and they do something different with it, and I'm like, oh wow, like they brought some humanity to that line, when maybe when I wrote it, it was a very dry, like, reading, in my head or whatever. So I love those moments, but, like, then that kind of it makes the pacing of that scene different, and so that changes. But also to kind of get even more specific is, like, individual takes. Like, when you're on a film set, you're capturing your wide shot, which is possibly the entire scene from one angle, or it can be like you can, like, have a wide shot of, like, the beginning of the scene and then a wide shot of the other part of the scene, or you can have a moving wide shot, which is what Spielberg does all the time. They call it a oneer. You could do it that way, which is very interesting and very cool to do if you can pull it off. But more often than not, like, you're going in for coverage. You're getting an over the shoulder on a particular actor, or you're getting a single shot on an actor, and you're letting them go through the entire scene. And so the rhythm of how they do that, how they perform that, can sometimes feel really good. Like, there's been plenty of times when we've punched in on an actor, and it's like they do the scene, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was beautiful. Oh, this is gonna look so good in the edit. And then, so you get into the edit room, and even though, like, you're watching an entire performance when you're on set, when you have to cut it together with everybody else's, like, takes, it changes the rhythm of that, and the scene becomes different because of that. And now I'm kind of going all over the place, but I'm like, follow me for a moment. It's like there are different stages in which the pacing of a story, it just changes, and sometimes it's for the good, and sometimes sometimes it just doesn't work because of a particular detail that just didn't work out. And I've had this happen many times in the edit room, where I'm just like, I'm looking at the scene and we're cutting it together, and I'm like, wow, when we had the shot on that one actor, and it was just them doing their part of the scene, like, it felt natural, it felt genuine, it felt like I could feel the humanity coming through the screen. But now that we have to cut it up and cut back and forth between the actors, it's like that rhythm changes now, and that energy between the two actors is changing because we have to keep cutting back and forth, or because there are certain things that we have to do in the edit to make the scene coherent, and not to make it coherent necessarily, but because you want to show the other actor, you want to show the space that they're in, so that the audience knows what's happening, there are any number of ways that you can cut it together, which also plays into the whole pacing and rhythm of a film. And a part of that too is like there's the pacing of television, of like sitcoms and TV shows that is a lot quicker. And the performances as well is a different pace that's a lot quicker. And that's something I learned on my last film, is that the actors were doing their scenes, and like I really wanted quick performance. Like I really wanted the dialogue to be kind of like quick in certain scenes, and so some people on the crew were like, "Hey Tim, like in film, like the actors, like the performances are slower," and it just kind of like, I was like, "Wait a minute, is it?" And I went to go watch some other movies, and I'm like, yeah, it is. Like the performances are a lot slower. They're a lot calmer. They take more time to do to just for their performances. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, because like when I wrote the script, I wrote it as like something to like, especially in certain scenes where it's like things are moving really fast, like the way there's a debate happening, there's like conversation, there's it's like we need to do this, no we need to do that, no we need to do that, and it was like very, very fast. But then I was like, well, it doesn't have to be like this scene can actually slow down a lot, and there can be more kind of like moments where the characters are considering things, because it's a film, it's not television. We don't need to hit a commercial break. We can take our time here. And that was just a piece of advice that I was just like, it blew my mind for a second. I was just like, yeah, that's right. Like there are different types of like there's different pacing to whatever it is you're trying to make. Because before I was like, oh, well, like theater acting is usually very fast. I mean, there are moments where it can be like slow, but for the most part, it's like, the shows themselves are so long that like, you got to keep the energy up. And every single time you come out on that stage, like you got to keep your energy up. And so there's this sense of like, of like urgency and a fast pace, and even if it's a drama, like there's still this idea that like you got to get to the next moment, because we're like there's an audience there who's expecting to be here for a certain amount of time, and we got to get them home, so let's not like spend 5 minutes on this one moment. We kind of have to like keep going. But as opposed to like, film, where it's like you got like, it's going to be 2 hours or 3 hours, it's like, and you have control over that as a director, as the editor, you can kind of make it any length you want. And, so, but yeah, so with that, I was like, okay, so there's different pacing, and film is a lot slower, which allows for the audience to kind of take in the world. And that is a part of film that I think has been with me for a while, that like when I watch a film, I feel like it's inviting me in. Like there's this slow kind of like, all right, audience, come with us on this adventure, on this story. And depending on the genre, like it can be really fast, like an action movie. It's like things are happening a lot, or like the hero needs to get somewhere to save somebody, to do this, that, or the other thing. And then there are dramas where it's like it's very slow paced. A lot of it is like about the characters relating to one another, having conflicts, learning things, or just like dealing with some kind of conflict, and they may or may not there may or may not be a happy ending. So yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you guys like see the same kind of, have you noticed the same thing in your own work? Like do you even care about pacing? Because I think it's something that a lot of people like know intuitively, but they don't think about it as often as maybe they should. I know that like in editing something, I feel the edit. Like when I'm trying to cut a scene together, it's like there's something intuitive in me that I'm just like I'll watch, I'll watch a shot, and I'll say, okay, this feels right to cut right here. It's like I don't turn it into like this math problem. It's just like, oh, at this moment feels right to cut to something else, or this might not like work, so maybe we need to cut sooner on this shot, and just the mechanics of how to put together a scene is very interesting, because sometimes you can cut together the scene with the right shots, but if you trim off a frame here or there, so sometimes that makes all the difference. Sometimes that can make or break a scene, just because you cut sooner or later on a performance. And that just like that's amazing that like we're able to have that kind of effect just by cutting off a couple frames or adding a couple frames. Like that, I mean, that's why I do film. That's why I'm in this, because those little, like, I guess, magic tricks, or just those little details that the audience will never know about, and who knows if they even care about it. But I mean, but it affects them in such a deep way. It's like, wow, there's so much that we do as filmmakers that can really like affect an audience, and sometimes it's like the rhythm is like a jarring cut, and sometimes it's like a very smooth like transition, a dissolve into something. Like, there are any number of ways that you can do it, and it really depends on the type of story, and also depends on the type of effect you're trying to have on the audience. It's like, it's just that there are endless possibilities, and it, in a way that's kind of like why I tend to point back to how I feel about what I'm working on. Like, does this feel right? And then if it feels right, then I have to go to the next step of like, well, is what is happening in the scene and in the script and in the story, does it make sense? And if it makes sense, then does it make, like just I have to go through kind of like my layers of like, okay, there's the facts of the story, there's the rhythm of the story, there's like what actually makes sense for the story, because sometimes the story may feel really good, and then I go back into it and I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. Like, what this character doesn't make any sense. It feels good. It feel like narratively it feels good. It feels like things are flowing very smoothly. The characters are cohesive and they make sense. But at the end of writing the script, or hopefully not when after you've shot the thing, but it's like at a certain point you kind of step back and you're like, well, does it feel good as a story? And does it make sense? And sometimes like an audience like will say, yeah, I really like this film because like the rhythm, the pacing felt good, but it makes no damn sense at all. It's a hodgepodge of nonsense, but I like it because it feels good, because it's something about the rhythm of it gives me comfort. I think that's why we go back to a lot of films that are considered to be bad films. It's like, because something about the pacing, something about the rhythm of that film brings comfort to us, and that's part of the nostalgia of it too. It's like, if you watched it when you were young and you had no idea about like what a good film was, it doesn't matter. Like, just that rhythm, just that pace of that film brings you some kind of, it brings comfort. And so that's why like this whole idea about like, oh, it's not the best film in the world. It's like, no, there are lots of films that are never going to be the best film in the world, and we should stop comparing films and saying, oh, they're not the best film in the world. It's like, yeah. Let's not try to make, make the best you can, but it's like, no, there are only a few films that maybe qualify as the best film in the world. So, but still, it's like, let's stop talking about film like that, because it's absolute nonsense. Did you like it? Yes or no? Was there, was the pacing good? Was there something about it that you took away from it that you can come back to, time and time again, because it made you feel something? Yes. Okay. That was pacing, that was character, that was narrative, that was stakes, that was whatever, fill in the blank. But, it's something that you can come back to because you love it. And we should never diminish that just because it's not the best film in the world. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but my main point was, the pacing of what you make, it matters. It's we're human beings with hearts that beat, and that's why we love music. That's why we gravitate towards certain things. There's a rhythm in the world. There's a rhythm in the things that we make, and that's something that we shouldn't not think about when we're creating something, or when we're thinking about what makes us feel good as creative people. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for today. So yes, thank you everybody for listening. I need to thank everybody every episode, because I really appreciate it, and I don't say it enough. And I hope everybody's being safe out there. I hope your situation is getting better, and this whole pandemic is starting to kind of I don't want to say it's coming to an end, but it's getting manageable. It's getting to a point where we can walk outside and we can hug each other, and we can, talk to each other without masks and stuff. It feels like we're getting very close to that time, but, I'm very cautiously optimistic, because I know that at any moment things can kind of go the other way. And I hope it doesn't. I hope we keep moving towards the positive and not towards the negative. So anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got for today, and I'll talk to you on the next one. And also, if you want to connect with me, I have an email for the podcast. It's tentative.title.with.tim.podcast@gmail.com. Also, I have a Twitter account for the podcast where I post episodes, and that is @title_Tim. And you can find also on the Facebook page, I have a page for the podcast, so you can connect with me there. Looking forward to hearing from all of you, and until then, I'll catch you on the next one.